I always love March Madness, but I think this year I have an added level of intrigue and interest and excitement because we missed it last year. Do you feel the same way?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, it has felt like just a couple of months, but it's also felt like 10 years. It feels like yesterday being at that first session of the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden when I was down there, and then you didn't really know if that next day was going to take place. And obviously then the world shut down, the NBA shut down with the Rudy Gobert news while we were in the tunnel at the Garden post-game. And, to be able to get to this point now is special.
Let's start with the one seeds. Out of the four number ones, who's the most vulnerable?
Michigan. They, this Isaiah Livers thing is real, and that's not to take anything away from what Michigan and Jahvon Howard and those guys did this year. I think it's just more comparing them to the three other number ones. I mean, you look at Illinois, you look at Baylor, and you look at Zags, and you look at the star power, the future lottery picks that those three number ones have, and you look at their three paths, especially Gonzaga in the West. I just look at Michigan with obviously this Isaiah Livers and such a veteran piece of the puzzle for Jahvon Howard. And then I look at other teams within that field, that bracket, that part in the East, DA, especially like a Florida State, Texas playing so hot, and then a dangerous team like a UConn. I think the East is wide open.
A lot of people were surprised to see Michigan State and UCLA as part of the first four. That means they were the last couple of at-larges in the field. Did you think either or both the Spartans or the Bruins got robbed?
No, I thought they both would make it. But when you look at the other resumes, and when you look at who was just on the outside looking in, like a Louisville, when you look at, we had a year, DA, that was a little unique in the sense that normally championship week we're talking about, all right, does this team have to win one more? Do they have to win two more? Do they have to make it to championship night? Or this was a little unique because that handful of question marks, were waiting on what other people were doing. Yet Oregon State was a bit stealer. Nobody planned on Georgetown going on a run like that. So it becomes a trickle-down effect. Yes, a Syracuse sneaks in, but a Louisville gets placed out. And then obviously such a unique year with UCLA and Michigan State being there. But I think Michigan State will win that one and probably the next one. Tom Izzo's team went through a lot of pauses. They had to deal with challenges with point guard play at times. But remember, they still beat some of the top teams in the Big Ten. I think they're more battle-tested than a typical 11 seed.
Vin Parise joins us, college basketball insider, helping us break down your brackets. Is Cade Cunningham at Oklahoma State the best player in the tournament?
Yeah, he's an absolute stud. Obviously, Luka Garza deserved being the college basketball player of the year. But when I come in contact with NBA scouts on the road with calling games, I mean, obviously he's one of the first names you're ever going to hear. But I'll tell you what, they have big time talent. There is lottery pick star power throughout every single region, whether you want to talk about Baylor, whether you want to talk about Oklahoma State, you want to talk about Jared Butler. And, Gonzaga, we still look at them as like, they're the Zags. When are they going to win the national championship? I mean, their talent level, Damon, this year is off the charts. I mean, Corey Kispert is going to be a top 10 pick. Jalen Suggs is going to be a top 10 pick and usually the best perimeter player on the floor. So, yes, with Cade, but I'll tell you, it's not a lot of difference when you talk about those All-Americans.
Suggs is awesome. Cade Cunningham is awesome. But for our NBA fans listening right now that want a reason to watch the NCAA tournament, what are some of those other guys that you're mentioning that are high-end NBA talent that'll be playing in March Madness?
Well, I'll tell you, you look at this field, and there's scary guards in terms of who could shoot it. There's scary talent in terms of who could play on the perimeter. But you got to look at like a USC. There's not that often to where you're going to have someone that's 7 foot and is able to shoot the basketball and able to handle and deflect shots like this. I think this is a unique dynamic for NBA fans, BA, because we're so often thinking that the best players in college basketball during the season are going to be future pros. You look at like a Miles Powell last year from Seton Hall. He dominates college basketball, but then he's in the G League. Or you look at like a Luka Garza this year. He dominates college basketball, but he's projected second round. Future NBA talent is another level. So I think when you look at like a Jared Butler, I mean, there are fun perimeter guys that are not only athletic but that could shoot it from the outside. It's going to be fun.
Give me some double-digit seeds that could be bracket busters, that could win a game or two and kind of flip the script in March.
I think Rutgers is much better than a 10 seed, and I don't think that they could have gotten a better draw. You look at that 7-10 matchup with the Clemson. Amir Sims for Clemson does the majority of his damage off pick and rolls in the three-point line, and Clemson's legit, even though they got bounced out of the first round of the ACC tournament by Miami. But, Rutgers, Steve Peichel, great at pick-and-roll defense. That's a good matchup for them. And then I even like them slowing down Houston in the next game because they're so much more battle-tested. They're a perfect example, DA, of somebody that's going to look better when they get into tournament play because they've been playing those beasts of the Big Ten the entire time. So I do, though, think it's going to be a very chalky year, especially when you get from the Elite Eight, Sweet 16 on and in. Of course, there'll be some surprises these next few days because that's what makes the tournament great. But there are double-digit seeds that could go a little bit farther. And like a Syracuse, for example, against San Diego State in the 6-11 game. That's not to take anything away from the year that San Diego State had, but style is not talked about enough when people are filling out their brackets in the tournament. We get caught up in ranking and stats and NBA players sometimes. It's about style, and they did not see zone this year at all. And now all of a sudden, you take, obviously Syracuse struggled at times offensively, but now you have Jim Boeheim's 2-3 zone throwing you out of whack, and now it's a completely different ball game in the second half. So, style and those type of matchups can affect double-digit seeds moving on. And the last one, I think, is a Georgetown. That is no way that's a typical 12 seed. I mean, Jahvon Blair is playing out of his mind right now. Patrick Ewing has size, length inside defensively. I mean, it could really make the game ugly.
Never win the Big East tournament and end up as a 12 seed, but that's what Georgetown is. So you're right. It's a dangerous 12 seed for sure. So you mentioned Rutgers out of the Big Ten. The Big Ten's been the best conference all season long. Is it a safe bet if you're picking the brackets to just push Big Ten teams along through each games and end up with 2 or 3 of them in the Final Four?
Yeah, I mean, it's that type of year. I mean, we had one of those years, as you remember, with the Big East back in the day. I think Ohio State will get by Arkansas in the Sweet 16. But to me, I can't find a way to bet against an Illinois. I mean, they have the best closer and best playmaker in Ayo Dosunmu at the point running the show for Brad Underwood, who's a terrific coach. Kofi Coburn on the inside is an absolute beast. I mean, they're the best 1-2 punch inside-outside. And think about it. They won more Big Ten games than anybody this year. They win the conference tournament. They go 14-1 in their final 15. I mean, they have size. They rebound. I just can't find a hole in the resume or, in their toolbox right now to not go with Illinois to win the entire thing.
Vin Parise joins us, college basketball insider for FS1, amongst other outlets. If we're looking at Gonzaga, the number 1 overall seed, man, the 2, the 3, the 4 in their side of the bracket in the region, they've beaten them all earlier in the season. So who out of their region is the biggest threat to knocking off Gonzaga before the Final Four?
Well, that's a great point. A lot of times we're always talking about Gonzaga and the conference that they play in out west historically over the years. But you're right. I mean, they were undefeated. They were perfect in quad 1 play. They beat Kansas, beat Iowa, beat West Virginia, beat Virginia this year. But Iowa as the 2 seed is still the biggest threat in the West. And what makes Iowa dangerous, DA, is the fact that they have Luka Garza on the inside, but Fran McCafferty surrounded him with elite three-point shooting. So that's the key. If dependent upon, now they give up points. They give up points. And, Iowa scored against them. But here's the problem, that Gonzaga will score in the 90s if you score in the 80s. Now, how's their defensive game plan play out? Do one of Mark Few's studs get into a little foul trouble? Do they try to control tempo? But it's going to come down to how many three-point shots they make playing off of Garza on the inside. But I think from a pure firepower offensive standpoint, Iowa is still the biggest threat out of the West region.
Picking the 5-12 upset is kind of what everybody does. It's our favorite parlor game. So I'm going to give you the 5-12s, and you let me know who's got the best shot of pulling off the upset as a 12. 5-12 is Creighton against Santa Barbara's Gauchos. 5-12 is Villanova against the Winthrop Eagles. 5-12, as you mentioned, is Georgetown coming out of the Big East against Colorado. And 5-12 is also Tennessee versus Oregon State, who won the Pac-12 tournament. Which 12 there is most live?
I still going to go with Georgetown. I mean, I think people are going to get caught up with Villanova's injuries. I still think they survive with Winthrop. Creighton was a dud in the Big East tournament, but I think that McDermott with Zagorowski and their elite perimeter shooting will be okay against Santa Barbara, who likes to get up and down. Oregon State, got hot at the right time. But I think that Tennessee, with their lengths and athleticism, will still be okay. It's the Georgetown one I love because Colorado has a similar resume to Creighton. Well, Quinley Wright's probably, and that's the best guard play they've had there since the Chauncey Billups years. But, they've never encountered length and size like this and confidence that Patrick Ewing has inside. And what they did versus Creighton was a defensive clinic. And Patrick Ewing doesn't get enough props for how good he is X's and O's. They chased guys off the three-point line, meaning they overcommitted, they overclosed out, and funneled them into the paint to deal with Wahab and the length and the size. And I don't think that, a team like Colorado out west saw something like that. If you're a 5 seed, you have a good year like a Colorado, that is not the 12 you want to see. But I'll tell you what, DA, for double digits and upsets, you got to keep your eye on this Ohio-Virginia game. Virginia, as we know, is off the entire week. The coaches are having Zoom meetings. They're not around the kids. They're not going to get themselves going until Friday down out in Indy for a Saturday game. And this guard, Jason Preston from Ohio, I've called a few of their games recently. He's a stud. He's 6'4". He averages almost 20 points per game. The team is legit. They only lost to Illinois by 2 back in November. They put up 101 points against Cleveland State. He's on scouts draft boards for next year. Virginia has to show up and be ready to roll in that 4-13 game.
So your champion, you said, was Illinois earlier in the conversation. Who is your Final Four around Illinois?
I got the Zags out of the West. I have Baylor coming out of the South. Obviously, I love Illinois winning the entire thing. And I have Florida State coming out of the East. Leonard Hamilton had Final Four written all over him last year before the pandemic. Obviously, he lost some guys to the next level, but he still has Scotty Barnes, who's a future pro, so he has star power. Leonard Hamilton will play 8, 9, 10 guys, super athletic. They came in second place in the ACC this year. They're the best offensive team in the ACC this year. I honestly do not know why. Maybe it's because Texas and Shaka was, finished so hot, and Michigan was a great story this year. I'm just surprised that more people aren't talking about the Seminoles coming out of the East.
Vin Parise, he's got 3 number 1s and a number 4 going to the Final Four at Illinois, cutting down the nets in Indianapolis. You can watch him on Fox Sports and FS1, as well as SNY TV in New York. You can follow him on Twitter for the latest of his thoughts on March Madness at Vin Parise. Vin, man, it's always good to catch up. Enjoy March Madness, man. Let's do it again as the tournament rolls on.